Welcome to Pretty Blunt. I am your host, Jamie Lipowitz. I am joined by my partner in crime, Sabine Schwartz. Sabine,
Hello.
what's the hot gossip, girl?
Well, long time no chat, but I wanted to talk a little bit today. You and I talk about this all the time. It doesn't matter if the Budtender likes you.
No, it doesn't matter at all. The Budtender has to remember you. They have to be willing to recommend you, but they don't have to be your customer. They don't have to love you.
Okay, so let's break that down. What do you mean they're not your customer?
So the Budtender might fall into your customer archetype, sure. And in that case, it's like amazing if they love you because that means your marketing is working and your brand is positioned properly. But if they don't fall into your customer archetype, they only need to be able to recommend you to your customer archetype. Doesn't actually matter if they buy your products, love your products, consume your products.
So I think that's a good point because it's like we hear all the time that people want the Budtender to like them so that the Budtender can sell them. And people often think that samples equal they will like me afterwards, which I also don't think makes sense because sometimes you can give a bad sample and that person will not like you afterwards.
Correct.
But in a different world, if I was working at Future Shop, the Sony guy comes and trains me. The Bose guy comes and trains me. The Apple guy comes and trains me. I'm not their target customer. A lot of those people I couldn't afford. Or it just isn't right for me. Like, I'm not going to buy a car stereo if I don't have a car.
Well, I love those videos on TikTok at the dealerships where they ask people what kind of cars they drive. And they might be working at like a Lexus or a BMW, but that doesn't mean that they don't drive a Toyota because that doesn't mean that they can necessarily afford the Lexus or the BMW, right? The other example is there's people who work at Sephora. We talk about beauty a lot. I don't particularly love red lipstick, but that doesn't mean that I couldn't sell a red lipstick to somebody. It matters that your product and your brand is clearly marketed to the person that it is meant for. And if a Budtender falls into that, amazing. There's alignment there. We can always talk about what we consume and what we like and all of those things. But if they don't fall into it, they don't need to love you and use your products. They just need to understand why it exists and be able to recommend it to the person that it's designed for.
Before you go any further, though, I want to talk about the difference between like a customer and the audience. We always think the Budtender is the customer, and they're not. They are an audience that you have to serve to teach them effectively about your product. It's also just about what you like. I actually might only like distillate, and my brand is a distillate brand, but it's the customer versus the audience. How do you see those as different?
Well, I think in cannabis, we often confuse the two.
Right.
Trade is the brand's customer, right? They're buying the products to put on the shelf, but inevitably their job is to buy low and sell high. And so they have to then sell to the consumers who come into their stores. And I believe that retail in this model really owns the customer, right? So the brand is making products for trade to buy and then has to enable trade to be able to sell to the consumer. They skip that step entirely a lot of the times. They don't enable trade to sell to the consumer because they get paid when trade buys for them. But if anybody has, followed our boy Rob McPherson on LinkedIn, he talks a lot about distribution versus consumption and getting consumption up. Distribution is great. Product is getting on the shelf. Sure, that's amazing. But you need consumption. You need it reordered and reordered and reordered. And so if you're not enabling your trade to be able to effectively recommend to consumers, the product sits on the shelf. Doesn't matter.
The biggest piece in this puzzle is that people don't know who their customer is.
Yeah, no one does. Very few do. I shouldn't say no one does. Very few do.
For me, that is the root of all evil in many ways because like they don't know who their actual customer is. They think that their weed is fire and that fire sells fire. And I actually had an interesting conversation with someone. This is related. Back in my day, maybe potentially you would buy flour from someone on the market and then someone else would buy flour from someone on the market. And fundamentally, that same lot can exist in two different packages and be on the shelf in two different brands. I have to be able to prove that mine is better, even though it's not better, because they are the same exact flour. So it's like knowing who my customer is and how they would think this is interesting or what would attract them is actually going to get me more sales. But it's not about the flour being good because the flour can be good in both places and be sold at very different prices and reach a very different audience.
Well, what's the story you're telling for somebody to pick you?
Right.
There's lots of worlds where the commodity essentially like is the same. So if you go to a supermarket, oftentimes they'll have, the greens on the wall, and then they'll have packages of lettuce. They're the same product, but what is the thing that's making somebody choose the unmarked commodity, essentially, and Andy Boy romaine lettuce? How I know brand works is because I know that the brand of lettuce is called Andy Boy. And I don't like the other brands. I like the Andy Boy. And so it exists across the board. I could go and buy just a regular head of romaine if I wanted to, but why do we buy the prepackaged one? Well, there's something in it that speaks to the audience that makes them either spend a little bit more or whatever the case may be to pick that thing.
Well, and so I think that's it. That's the first thing is people don't know who their customer is. They think their customer is 35 to 45, makes X amount of money per year. And that gives them a very loose understanding of who it is. They don't actually understand what that person cares about.
They give a demographic.
Hmm.
They don't give a psychographic profile. A psychographic profile tells you what the person cares about and what the person is interested. When you're telling me that your, target audience is, men 25 to 54 who make 80 to 120K a year, okay, that's a segment of the population. What do they actually care about? But if you told me, they care about, I'm going to make this up, this is really bad, but like maybe they're like biking and fitness enthusiasts and they're using cannabis for high performance, sport performance. I don't even think that's a word, but you get the point I'm trying to make. That at least tells me about something that they care about. And then if I know what they care about, I can craft a story to make them care about my product and how it fits into what they're looking for. But if you tell me their age and how much money they make, all I know is what percentage of the population I potentially could talk to.
So I think that's it is like understanding who they care about is like how you're going to get your customer to find you. But fundamentally, you have to explain to the bud tender why that customer should care. You don't have to convince the bud tender to care. You have to explain to that bud tender why your customer should care. And that's the piece that we're missing is they're like, oh, the bud tender has to talk about it. They have to say that we're great. And it's like they have to explain why that person should care about your product, not why they do.
Right, because the brand experience for a customer starts at retail, most
Mhm.
definitely, but it really begins when they open up the product, at home, at the party, or wherever they're using it, and hoping that it meets their needs. So if you have a soccer mom coming into a retail shop and she's looking for, a low dose edible to like take the edge off, or maybe, something because her kids are driving her nuts, and the bud tender sells her, a infused 40+% blunt, well, her brand experience is going to be terrible. It doesn't matter that she bought it. What matters is how she uses it and if it meets the needs assessment that she's created for why she's purchasing the product to begin with. And so part of it is the customers have to be able to loosely articulate what they're looking for and what they care about. And the bud tender needs to be able to respond to that with a proper recommendation that's going to meet the need state. Because you can sell all the blunts you want, but if somebody is like getting, has a bad high, greens out, like whatever, doesn't matter, you've lost them. And then overall, I think that hinders this industry greatly because I don't think phase 2.0 of this industry or 3.0 or 4.0, whatever phase we're at right now, I don't think it's about illicit market customers coming into the legal market per se. I think the way we grow this pie is by bringing new customers in under consumption, and we have to make sure that we're meeting their needs and not just selling them things and then turning them off of the category altogether.
It's a good point because the biggest thing that we know is that, well, what we want to do, and why this whole conversation exists, is the bud tender needs to be empowered to sell your product. And by us not doing that, by us assuming that every customer is the bud tender and every bud tender is the customer, we're actually doing the industry a disservice. Because again, we're missing the opportunity to meet the customer where they're at and have like a normal conversation with them when they might not actually care about the potency and they just want something a little that tastes good. Like sometimes we're actually overcomplicating it by assuming all of these other things We just have to tell the customer what the customer wants, and you have to make it easy for the budtender to do that.
Well, I saw a post this morning on LinkedIn that I thought was really good where somebody said, "We don't have a competition problem, we have a copycat problem."
Hmm.
I fully agree with that statement. Everybody's just me tooing it. Oh, you put out a blue raspberry edible and you're like doing really well with it. Cool, me too. Oh, Oxley's Back 40 all in one vape has like essentially reignited this category. Okay, great. We're going to come after that. Me too. And they're competing on like an apples to apples comparison of the product, and they're not doing the actual thinking around who that product is for and why they're, going after that share of the market. We saw in our first OCS PK session way back when a brand introduced their product, their reasoning for it coming to the market is, well, no one's brought out a 50% plus product. Okay, but who cares? Who wants it? Who's it for? If you're just saying like, oh, it's 50%, okay, well, I'm going to go to the next thing that comes out that's 50% and maybe it's cheaper. If your whole value equation is potency and price, well, we've seen people can beat you over and over and over again, drop the price, up the potency. You're renting market share. You don't own it.
Well, and so I think that's also a part of it because a lot of the times we are seeking that thing that has an opportunity. You know, you're like, oh, right, exactly that. There's not a extra high potency available in this format on the market. Great, someone's gonna buy it, but we haven't thought, what would our customer actually like to buy? We're doing it backwards almost, which is really it's interesting.
So when I started High Buds Club, initially my thesis was that this was for all budtenders. Every budtender who worked at a retail store was going to want to do this.
You know how I feel about that.
I know it's crazy. And when I say it, knowing today what I know, it's a ridiculous statement. It is like truly ridiculous. But I didn't know what I didn't know. We've come to realize, and through trial and error, through defining our audience and what they care about and why they care about it, it's 35 to 40% of the bud tenders in the legal market are High Buds Club members. They're the right kind of bud tenders for our community. You still had to do the thinking around who it was for.
Right.
And so when I was defining my audience as bud tenders, I still did exercises around what I thought bud tenders would care about, what the motivations would be to join. Some of that was right and some of that was wrong. And as I've, gone down this rabbit hole, we have far more information today than I did back then. The thesis still stands that my community is for bud tenders. Here's what bud tenders care about. And then we had to figure out what percentage of the market, was our total addressable market that could be bud tenders in our community. The brands haven't done any of that initial thinking. So they might think, oh, it's for women, 25 to 34 who've got two kids or whatever it is. But if you don't know what they care about, if you don't know why they're there, if you don't know what stress point or pain point or reason to believe in your product is or your brand is, well, it's just a product on a shelf. And if you don't do any of the initial thinking, doesn't matter. I'm asking you, do you think that P&G just throws products against the wall and hope they stick? Or do you think they do a lot of initial market research, testing? They go deep into discovery of who the product is for, why it's going to exist, who they're meant to service, and then they go to market.
It's the latter, like, because exactly that. They're like, oh, our customer has this problem, and we know they need moisture that's going to last for their entire workday. And then they make a lotion that has moisture that's going to last for that entire workday versus being like, we have this really incredible lotion. Someone's going to buy it. And that often is what I think this industry does. The customers, we have to understand what the customer wants. We have to explain to the bud tender how to explain that this is a good fit for you. And then the bud tender matters because they're a salesperson. They don't matter because they're your super fan.
They're an outlet to get to the customer. But the root of all great marketing, truly, is storytelling. So if you're not storytelling to the bud tender, how are you expecting the bud tender to be able to storytell to the consumer?
Right.
If you're not giving them the information ahead of time, how are they supposed to know?
All they know is that it tastes good or they liked it.
Or it's 30% THC. There's a ton of like really great infused pre-rolls on the market right now. I'm not an infused girly. I'm like a, classic, just give me like a regular, degular joint and I'm happy. But I could sell infused pre-rolls because I understand the difference between a Jeter over a GA over a slugger. Like there's different pieces to each brand, and how you talk about them and what, makes the customer care about them is really important in getting that customer to purchase the product, get excited about the product, and then hopefully they have an incredible experience, hits the reason that they purchased it to begin with, and then they come back and buy it again.
I would actually love to challenge everyone. I just thought of this, but like I would love to see like a customer page that's not just like who we are for. I'd love to see who we're not for.
Right.
I actually think that that comparison is also really important. You can't be for everyone. We talk about this all the time. And so, like, sometimes the actual thought of, like, oh, we don't serve these people is actually really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it's all on a spectrum, right? So if you know that your product is designed for one end of the spectrum, well, you're not going to delight the other end.
That's okay.
And that's okay. Bring out a different brand for that customer, if you really want to. Brands that are, or rather try to be for everybody, are for no one.
Well, and I think that's it. Like, we often hear that they want to have every bud tender like them. And that's one of the hesitations that we hear from our clients all the time is they're like, well, what if they don't like me? And I'm like, doesn't matter. I don't like a lot of people. I don't like a lot of things. But, like, do you know what I do like? I like knowing and I like being able to do my job well. And that's what the bud tenders want is they actually just want to be able to do their job well and explain effectively like who you are and what you're about so that they can sell you.
I would also argue that they don't need to love you, but you also can't make them hate you.
That is completely fair.
I've heard many horror stories from the Budtenders that they showed up to this event and a brand rep was rude and, dismissive or whatever. And I quote, I will never sell that brand again. I will never, bring that product into store or whatever the case is. You still need to treat the Budtender with respect. You still need, from a B2B perspective, you need them to have some sort of affinity for your representative in market and like who represents your brand, but they don't actually need to consume your brand, buy your brand, and be the customer of your brand rather for it to be a successful relationship.
Well, and I think that's it. It's like if everyone put the same amount of focus into understanding who their customer was, everything else would ladder up. Like you would be more effectively able to train the bud tenders on how to sell this item and not worry about whether or not they personally dislike liquid diamonds.
Yeah, but it's the foundation of everything.
Right.
And so, what I like to think about is like building a house. You can build a house and get it really high. If the foundation is toxic or built poorly or whatever, the house crumbles. There's all these brands out there who have market share today. And they have market share today because they are priced properly. They were first to market. There's a whole plethora of reasons why they have market share today, but they don't have a moat that's defensible. And so if your value proposition is cheap, okay, well, all it takes is somebody else to come out with something cheaper.
I'm going to break it down for the class. When you say moat, what do you mean in business?
A moat is something that defends the castle. So it's something that no one else has, essentially, that blocks your competitors to get in. And so I think our moat as High Buds Club is the High Buds Club feed and the community behind it. Because anybody could go and build technology, no problem. But there's a reason why the bud tenders come to High Buds Club and they, don't engage with other opportunities. That's the moat. For a brand, a commodity brand, consumer packaged goods brand, the only thing that they have that's their moat is their brand and their brand story and the affinity that brings people back, right? Like your brand loyal. We talk a lot, obviously, about Coca-Cola. Why do people say when you're in a restaurant and they go, oh, we only have Pepsi? Why do you go, ugh?
I literally just died a little bit inside. Like my emotional response was, ugh.
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 Ugh, I don't want your Diet Pepsi. I want your Diet Coke. That is the moat behind a 0-calorie cola. I'm choosing one brand over another because for whatever reason I like it better. What else you got? Anyone can grow weed today. That's table stakes. You don't even need to grow it. You can buy it and package it up and put it on a shelf. What's the reason anyone cares about your package on the shelf? I think we're going to see a lot of distinction between whole flower products and 2.0 packaged goods products. Because I think the real opportunity for cannabis brands to build brand is around the 2.0 product. It's more nuanced in whole flower, but that doesn't mean that there isn't still the ability to brand build. So it might be the story of the farm. It might be the story of the strains. It might be exclusive genetics and the genetic hunt to be able to buy those genetics and bring them to market. Still storytelling. It's one thing that sets you apart from everyone else.
What did you say earlier? You said copycats versus.
We don't have a competition problem. We have a copycat problem. I don't know who posted it. I saw it on LinkedIn this morning. It literally was one of those posts where I was like, oh my God, that's correct. Like, absolutely, like that is a perfect summation of the issue.
Hearing you talk about the storytelling behind the genetics, I think is a really good, hard, re-solidifying fact too. Because we often hear that everyone's like, we have unique genetics. And I'm like, cool, everyone has unique genetics. You have to tell me the story of why your genetics are different. Again, like in these CPG brands where, or the CPG commodities where, like, to be fair, that distillate vape might actually be the exact same as the other distillate vape on the market.
Mm-hmm.
It is about the storytelling of, like, when are you consuming it? Why did we make these decisions on this flavor and this thing? Like, it is actually like romanticizing your own brand a little bit.
Well, you have to romanticize it. I got sold on TikTok on this foundation. As you know. And the reason that I went to buy it was it hit two key components that I was looking for. One, it had all long-lasting wear all day. So I saw a lot of content around, like, early in the morning versus late at night and what the wear looked like and how the product wears over time on skin. And then the second reason was it was infused with skincare. All of these pieces hit the things that I'm looking for. To your point, it was romanticized for me on the effectiveness of this specific product and brand, and it drove me into store to buy it. But somebody had to tell me a story for me to care about it. I had seen it on the internet before on the brand's product page. It didn't do anything. I was like, oh, cool. They have a new foundation. Awesome. It was only once I heard over and over and over again those two components of it where I was like, that is for me. That could be for me. And then when I ran out of my product that I had purchased before, I was like, I'm going to try that because it's stuck in my head. The story burrows itself in your brain and takes up mind share. Otherwise, it's just going back to weed. Otherwise, it's just 30% THC cannabis. Who cares?
Storytelling, I think people think is complicated.
It
And I
is.
think no, it is complicated, but go
Yeah,
with me.
it is.
Yeah. But I think they think it's complicated when in reality, what I actually need you to give me is a sexy fun fact that the Budtender can use to compare. Go with me. I have two flower SKUs. They are $1 different. They both are decent. They're both unique genetics. I have to sell you and I have to be like, this one, the head grower spent 9 months pheno hunting this and like da da da. This one, yeah, it's unique. Like it's a new one they haven't brought out before. That actually is the difference. They are fundamentally very much the same thing, but it is the romanticization and like which one feels better. And that's it. It's just the one line to use to help your customer appropriately say yes to you in the store. That's it.
Yeah, but if you haven't done the preliminary thinking around why they would care about you, you're not empowering your frontline retail to be able to deliver that to a customer. The other thing is the role of the bud tender when you think about it, is really the role of a matchmaker.
Yep.
Their job is to match the right product to the right customer because the customer needs to have a good experience to come back. So the bud tender needs to be able to listen and be able to then say, oh, you want something low dose? Light label is for you. You want something really high infused? Okay, Jeter's for you, right? Like, they're both pre-rolls, but they're a different customer for the pre-roll. And so the bud tender's job is to matchmake and make sure that the right customer is getting the right product so that they have a great experience and then they come back.
Extrapolating on this matchmaker thing, and then I think we can round this bad boy up, but I actually think your matchmaker shtick is the best way to think about it. Here are my reasons why.
Okay.
Because if you're actually a matchmaker, you don't like your clients and the people you're matching them with. Like if I'm a matchmaker, I'm not trying to date the people that I'm trying to match.
No, but I'm gonna
You don't
give
like
you
them.
another. You gotta like them.
You don't
You
like them,
gotta
but
like them. You gotta believe in them.
you're
You
not in
gotta
love
believe
with
in
them
them.
though.
So, like, there's single people I know that I would never set up on a date, ever. There's also single people I know that I'm like, who do I know? You're amazing. I believe in you. Like, who do I know that's for you? You have to win the bud tender's mind share so that they like the idea of you, but they don't have to be your customer. I have lots of male friends that I do not want to date, but I would set them up with my friends because I think they're great.
Yes, that's exactly my point. Is like we think that everyone's like gonna get married to like their flower skew, and it's like no, guys, I'm smoking a lot of flower. We're rotating.
Yeah.
I actually think that that kind of wraps it up. It doesn't matter if the bud tender likes you. The bud tender needs to know how to talk about you to the right person. That is important. That is what we know.
One of the things that I just want to round this out with is that we have to also remember who we're talking to and why.
Mm.
So you're talking to trade because, yes, you want them to believe in you. You want them to stock your products. You want them to recommend your products, but you're not talking to them so that they buy your products for their own personal consumption over and over and over again. You have different audiences and you have to understand what message and what story you're telling to what audience. It's not one story for everybody and hoping and praying for the best.
My mic drop before we close it out is we want to empower bud tenders to sell you, not to smoke you.
And if they smoke you, that's an added bonus.
Absolutely.
Great. I'm going to wrap this bad boy up. That was some hot gossip, Sabine. See ya.